So changing careers is one option, right? Going to work at McDonald's or Wendy's is an option. And then two, within the teaching realm, right? We can tutor, right? One to one.
Mm.
We can go after
Mm-hmm.
school tutoring, or what we talk about a lot is kind of create an offer, right? Then maybe you can walk us through the differences if a teacher hasn't started at all, or they're kind of thinking about, hey, I have accepted precarity. It is what it is. I don't want to leave my job. I love my job, as we all do. But the reality of the situation is I can't depend on it for all the things that I need, so I need to do something else
Mm.
in conjunction, right? And the two obvious options are one-to-one tutoring and, quote unquote starting a business, but really just kind of creating an offer.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
It's a good question. I
Mm.
When I first started up, for me, everything was just I accepted precarity the moment I started teaching, I guess. I knew that I wouldn't be able to just teach. I would have to always do a little bit of something else on the side, and it has been pretty much the story of my life. I've always been, freelancing and doing different things here and there. Eventually, you realize that you can do a lot of one to one. But as you said, one to one is not something that you can scale. It's not something that eventually, if you're working full time and you're still doing some one to one, you're going to burn out. You're not going to, I mean, unless you are a machine, but no one can do that for a very long time or sustain that for a long period of time. And this is why you need some sort of an offer. And I'm going to give you a very good example, a very quick example of what an offer is to me. Is basically I work with one of my other jobs is I work with a lot of CEOs. So a lot of them are in the pharmaceutical industry, and basically a lot of them need English, but English is not the reason why they're there. They're there because they want to be able to develop themselves in very specific ways. Some of them want to work on critical thinking, some of them want to work on their ability to active more listening and communicate with more impact. But what we do is, instead of offering these guys sessions every week, what I've decided to do is I've created an offer where basically I tell them, if you spend, this is the investment, let's say, I'm going to throw a number out here, let's say $500 in those 4 weeks, every month they pay $500. And what's in that offer? They have 2 sessions a month with me, but they are able to ask me questions about all the readings, all the listenings that they receive from me. So whenever we have a session, we would say we have a first an online session, a synchronous lesson, and then after that I give them some work to do that week that they would have classes with me on the same time slot. I send them the work and they do the work during that time. And if they have any questions that they want to ask me, they can send me a message, they can send me an email. And then when we meet the week after, we talk about everything they read the previous week. And that's how we go. So an offer is not like I charge $50 per lesson. The offer is, if you want to work with me, here's the package, here's the transformation, here are the results that you're going to get.
Love it.
And do you
Love it.
find, Leo, that teachers sometimes confuse those
Mm.
two? That they think that selling, say, 10 lessons just of teaching business English is the same as a
It's
proper
very
offer? Is that?
different. If you sell 10 lessons, you're still selling your hours, right? You're still selling your hourly rate. And we all know
Mm.
that if you don't own a piece of a business, if you don't have a clear offer, you don't really have a path towards any sort of financial freedom, right? Because at the end of the day, it's always going to be ownership versus wage work, right? Even if you're, because think about this, if you're paid for renting out your time, and we know this, lawyers, doctors, engineers, whoever, you can make some money, but you're never going to make the kind of money that you can say, like, you know what, I actually am making enough money that gives me a little bit of financial freedom, because again, you don't have any sort of ownership. When you have an offer, you clearly have a very specific group of people that you work with. For example, and Andrew posted about this recently about learning to say no. I had a client who said, "Oh, I want to have classes with you every week." I said, "I don't offer that." I said,
Right.
"I don't offer that. That's not part of my offer. My offer is this. If you want to work with me, you will have classes with me twice a month for 50 minutes, and you will have an extra 10 hours of work for you to do to help you prepare for this transformation that we want to achieve." But she eventually she tried. She's like, oh, what if we do it, you know, only for half an hour every week? I said, it's not what I offer. So I was willing to say no
See,
to
this
her.
is so interesting, right? Because I think this is backwards. I think this is where a lot of like in any given situation, if someone really needs the money, then you just say yes and you do it, right?
course.
But in a theoretical situation where like you're
Yeah.
building wealth, you're building something, right? And as an aside, I think it's always one of my students told me this the other day. I think it's always really interesting to get the perspective of someone who's new to the country, new-ish,
Uh-huh.
right? And he was like, we were chatting about like what he's doing for work and stuff, and he's like, Andrew, I noticed something about Canada. I noticed the only way you can get rich here is if you own a business. It's the only way. Because the tax rate is different, the write-offs are different. If you just work for a wage at a job, you just pay you by the hour, and half of it is tax. And I was like, that's basically right. Like, and that's the people that statistically are the wealthiest people. You mentioned doctors, you mentioned lawyers. The reason they're technically wealthy is because they're partners in their practice. They don't. Being a partner means you have a part ownership, right? You don't get paid by the hour. You're part owner. So I thought that was a really interesting idea. And then the way that one way is in education that we can do that is what you just said, Leo, right? Is through what I think the most important word when developing an offer is fulfillment.
Yeah.
How do you fulfill? But that shouldn't really be the first thing, right? So when you're, to use our 5 stages of grief term, when you're bargaining with this potential client, you're going back and forth. Oh, I want classes once a week. Oh, I want classes twice a week. Irrelevant
Very.
to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
What's the goal? What are you looking to achieve? Like, if you could achieve the goal that you want without ever meeting me, would you do
Oh,
it?
I would.
Then what are we talking about?
Yeah.
Right? What do you need to meet me twice a week for? If I can help, I'm not saying that this
Yeah.
would work, but like, I think people get so caught up on the fulfillment of like, how often are we meeting?
Yes.
Who cares?
Or-
That's
yeah.
that's the logistics, right?
That's legit.
What's your 6-week goal or 8-week goal or 90-day goal or whatever it is? And if you could achieve that without all of this, would you still want to do that?
You know what?
And most people would say
Yeah.
yes. Of
I'll give
course.
you a very good example from the fitness industry. My personal trainer, I see him every 2 months. We have one check-in every 8 weeks. But during the check-in, we talk about what went well, what went wrong, what we could improve, what's the goal for the next 8 weeks. And I say, like, this next 8 weeks, I want to focus on mobility. And he's like, I'm going to give you a bunch of mobility exercise. The next 8 weeks, I want to focus more on chest and triceps. And he customizes that. Every
Mhm.
8 weeks, we have a meeting. He gives me exercises. He provides me a new diet every week. So he tells me what to eat, how much to weigh, like what the weight of the food is, how many carbs, how many grams of protein, and all that. All I have to do is follow. As you said, Andrew, the reason why I've been with him for almost 3 years is because he fulfills the promise. We talk about the problem, and he helps me get there. I have to do most of the work, right? And I think that's another thing too. Is like teachers
Right.
think that they have to carry all the burden of the learning.
Atlas complex,
Yeah.
right? So here's another food for thought on that before Mike, I'll let you jump in, right? Is on that point where I think a lot of teachers do think they have to do a lot of the work, and that's where the value lies. But in a hypothetical example, fitness doesn't work because it does take time to build muscle or to lose weight, right? But hypothetically, if you're wanting to write the IELTS test and go from 6.5 to 7, just as a generic example, and I said to you, okay, I have 2 offers for you. In option number 1, we work together for 90 days, and after 90 days, you'll have the skills to get 7.5. Okay? The second offer is within 24 hours, you'll have those same skills. Which one is more valuable?
Which one's possible?
I mean, if you
I've done both.
if you can deliver in 24 hours, then yeah, of course, 24 hours.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 24
Reduce
hours
the
is
time.
$5,000. 90 days is 500.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point. Very good point.
And people will say, well, wait a minute. No, no, no. But I access for 90 days and it should be more expensive. You're not paying for my time. You're paying for the result. If I can get you the result faster than everybody else, it's worth more.
Yeah.
Why wait 90 days for something you can get in 24 hours? Now, IELTS is not a good example because it's not, I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. But pricing is challenge number 2 for teachers that we see, right? Don't price on how long it takes. Arguably, you should charge more if you can do it faster.
Mm-hmm. You have to price based on the transformation that you're going to be offering. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why in pharmaceutical, like all those pills that people take for headaches and whatever, they're expensive. And then you take a yoga class and it's pretty cheap. Why? Because meditation takes time for you to feel the results. If you do, right? Take a pill, within 20 minutes, you got your transformation.
Mm-hmm. Certainly weight loss is a great example of that, right? The rise of weight loss medication. Yeah. Yeah.
Ozempic? What is it?
Ozempic.
Yeah.
Oh, Canada loves Ozempic.
Ozempic's actually a diabetes drug, but
it is.
Wegovy, I think, is the actual specific weight loss drug. Yeah.
But it's interesting, right? People are using it for weight loss now. Like they're asking their doc. Like we have these laws in
That's
Canada.
right,
You can't. Because
it gets you to the transformation faster, right?
And everyone knows it's unhealthy. I mean, I'm not saying it. I'm not libeling Ozempic, but like everyone knows taking pills is not as good for you as like doing the actual work, like exercising, meditation, yoga, whatever. And yet, most people just opt for the path of least resistance and the path of fastest results, right? Like that's human nature. I think that's pretty obvious. So as you're creating your offer, at times, adding more, to Leo's point, adding more live sessions and we see teachers make these long offers. I'm going to have a 6-month program, a 4-month program. That actually doesn't add value. That doesn't add value. That might even subtract value from your offer.
Yeah, that's true. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So rule number 1, what's the goal? Right? Number 2, why is it important? And then 3, which I think people forget or maybe don't consider, is the how, the steps.
Yeah.
Mike, we talk about this a lot, right? In 5 and 30 and TAP. And the steps are not fulfillment. Because when we ask people sometimes what the steps are, then they say, 2 sessions a week, feedback. No. Those aren't the steps. Imagine you never meet the person. You never even talk to them. What steps would you send them by email? Think about that, right?
And how explicit would those steps be, right? Like, are they quantifiable, right? Like, learn these 5 words, right? Or learn these 3 techniques, right? Before you move on to the next stage, you need to master these specific exercises. Leo, I remember you talking a little bit about when you first started with your personal trainer. He was just like, I know you might want to run ahead, but you need to first start with these exercises before you actually get started on workouts, right? But it was a set number of exercises for a set period of time. And then by the end of those 2 to 3 week period, you were then ready for that next step. But it was quantifiable, right? It was something that you could add to and build on each week until you got to that benchmark. And that's a kind of word that a lot of assessments use, but it's funny, teachers know what benchmarks are, but I find that some of the teachers that we work with, they kind of struggle operationalizing these things. As you suggested, Andrew, they might often think of the how of how this might unfold rather than the what. What are they actually specifically doing each week to get them to that transformation?
And I think that's the problem. Perhaps not the problem, but I think perhaps that's something that contributes to the problem, is the fact that because teachers are somewhat indoctrinated basically from the beginning of their teacher training course to work for someone, because every teacher training course prepares a teacher to work for an institution. What eventually becomes deeply ingrained in a teacher's mind is this idea that I have to charge by the hour because I am getting paid by the hour.
You get paid by the hour.
So if you get paid, so when they go out into the wild and they start building their teaching business, they're still doing that. They're still doing that.
And the other part of that is they're still working from a quasi course book,
Exactly.
right? Even if you're not using a course book, you're still, the steps would involve linguistic features, which would sound, I know it sounds strange. So like, well, of course it'd be
Yeah.
linguistic features. Like, yes, of course. But we talk a lot about the problem you solve is not linguistic, right? Number one, because it increases the value. Get to the real problem, right? Most people don't learn languages just for language's sake. It's a vehicle to do something. So what is the thing that they actually want to do? And what are the steps involved? In your example, Leo, with the trainer, right? I forget exactly what you said, but like the steps of like how to do a deadlift and how to do this and that. Those are like his version of the linguistic features, right? But that's not really your goal. You said something to him before that, like my non-weight training goal probably is this. I want to feel like this. I want to be able
Better
to do
balance,
this.
right?
I want to wake up in the morning and do this. I want, and then he prescribed these steps, right? So the linguistic part is like our prescription to the student, but it's not. The goal is most of the time not linguistically based. That would be where the value would lie.
It's like when a student tells you that they really want to be able to communicate in a variety of situations. So a student tells you like, oh, I want to be able to have small talk, have very formal conversations, have informal conversations. I want to be able to talk about this, be able to talk about that. What you're going to do with a student like that is you're going to prescribe a program, or not, you're going to create an offer where they would have a chance to come and talk to you. But someone like that needs to be very well read, so you can give them some extensive reading to do as part of your offer. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to teach you vocabulary about books, and then I'm going to teach you vocabulary about gardening, and then we're going to do a lesson on that's the wrong way of thinking about it. If you want them to achieve the transformation, which is to be able to talk about a variety of topics with confidence, create an extensive reading program as part of your offer, as well as them doing a few sessions with you where you both talk about specific things. You can teach them some strategies to learn vocabulary, but at the end of the day, we know the best way to learn vocabulary is just by reading. That's basically it. Just read and listen. That's it. Do a lot of that and then communicate with someone who is above your level, and you're going to be fine. But we don't do that. We're still thinking, let's teach this set of vocabulary words, and then we're going to teach this set of vocabulary words. It just doesn't go that way.
And I think part of that, Leo, comes from this idea of teachers not trusting their students and not wanting to give up control to their students. And I think what really kind of struck me when you were talking about your relationship with your personal trainer was that it's yes, the offer is there, and the offer is you have obviously a diet of exercise and a diet regime that you need to follow, but you're only talking with him every 8 weeks, but every time that you talk to him, he's expecting that you're going through and doing
exactly
the tasks.
And he knows when I don't. He knows, because when I send him my check-in pictures, he's like, how was this month? I said, well, and then I start rationalizing certain things, I was like, I had a very stressful month. He's like, did you do all the cardios? And I said, no, because I told him what my goals are. And he said, you're going to do this number of cardios, you're going to eat this amount of food, and you're going to do these exercises. If you don't do this, there is nothing. It's the same as a teacher thinking. And again, going back to that deeply inculcated mindset that we have, that teachers are responsible. They have to carry the weight of the world, and they just have to be responsible for everything. If you really want to break away from teaching one-to-one, you need to have a clear offer. And the people who will gravitate towards you, it's because they really want to achieve that transformation, and you know how to get them there.
I'll take that a step further. If you're offering what you've described one-to-one, and we'll talk about gardening one day and we'll talk about sports another day, that client should sign up to a language school.
Yes.
Because that's what they want.
Yeah.
That's what language schools offer. If that's what you're offering, you're competing with the schools at a lower price, and you're just cannibalizing yourself in a sense. You need something really specific where the fulfillment isn't you all the time, right? Yeah. I imagine therapy is like another example, as you were talking, Leo, right? Where basically a good teaching offer is where the client needs time and space to put in the
Yeah.
work, so to speak, on their own. If you went to see your therapist 4 times a week, you're not going to get better. You have to have time and space to implement what they recommend. At the end of the session, okay, this week, Andrew, I want you to really do this, communicate in this way, these whatever they, a variety of things that they might say. And when you come back next week or in 14 days, I want to hear how it went.